Leaderships sometimes or often is always beautiful theoretically, but the issue sometimes lies on there's a big gap between theories and reality. After all, sometimes in most of our contexts in Asia, by and large, leadership positions are still filled by older men. So in your opinion, what causes the gaps and how could we bridge this gap between theory and reality? Okay, anyone want to start first?
Yeah, yes, I'll take it. In the Asian context, I believe culture is mostly the culprit. You know, if we are looking at the issues that are really beneath the surface, I think culture is mostly the culprit of this. The Asian culture is hierarchical. You can't really deny that. It is rather top-down. But a couple of other things are also present, like a skewed understanding of the biblical idea of leadership even. People who don't share spaces intergenerationally have a very narrow understanding of the biblical idea of leadership, more like a one-man show or something like that. Along with that, most of the times, a layer of power is also present. You know, don't want to lose my power. I don't want to lose my control. And that is also there. It brings us right back to the full circle into that whole replacement and reinforcement thing that Garrett just shared about. You know, I'm not here to replace my pastor. I'm here to reinforce. Culture, and I would say a not proper understanding of biblical leadership and the lure of power. Those would be my submissions.
Thank you, Reverend Vijayesh. I think you share about the what causes the gap. Can anyone maybe also share a bit more? You see what causes the gaps? Maybe Miss Yamini.
I think what causes the gaps could also be, in one sense, stereotyping as well. Sometimes we also tend to stereotype gender. We tend to stereotype generations as well. So sometimes when we focus a lot on stereotyping, you know, then the gap just increases. And today, even what maybe you know, females are exposed to is very different to how it would be. For example, always in a male-dominated room, maybe they would ask the female to take down the minutes, you know, but it's no more like that. There's education and you know, what can be brought to the table in terms of that. And then maybe I also feel a lack of theological understanding and grounded understanding, and not being able to understand theology in the terms of the context that it was actually written in could also be a gap over the rest.
Thank you, Ms. Yamini. At least there are two more gaps. It's stereotyping or sometimes the lacking of the theological understanding. How about bridging the gap? Maybe Dr. Bambang, you want to share how to bridge the gap? And after that, Pastor Garrett also can share your points. How to bridge this gap?
Well, as we all heard, it is a difficult task, but it is possible. That's just the message. And culture, not only our Asian culture, but organizational culture is probably a significant factor impeding it. We often settle for good enough. So with our leader, we see good enough, but we don't have a lot of example like we have seen in the Heart of God or Sri Lanka Alliance, where intergenerational is exploding in impact. So since it is hard, we need to be more intentional, putting resources, helping each other, and discipline moving forward. And that we don't have seen much around. We have seen spotted here and there in Sri Lanka, Singapore, but we have not seen this as a priority together and highlighted more impact successful on those who have already applied. So that's probably what I would like to put on the table.
Thank you, Dr. Bambang. More intentional effort, more to it together, and more discipline in doing that. How about you, Pastor Garrett? What is your opinion?
Yeah, sure. And I think I can speak from personal experience, because I can share with you what I think my pastors did right for me. One thing my pastors would share with us is that love picks youth up in their weakness, but respect releases them into their strength. So my pastors more than just loved me, but they respected me, and they began to empower me to be a leader. And like what even Pastor Bambam said, that the leaders need to be secure, and I think my senior pastors, they're secure, and they actually want us to be even more successful than them. And then just a few days ago, I was in the room with my pastor, Pastor Howard, and he was just looking at me and says, I really want you to be more successful than me. That is a sign of my success. And I was just so encouraged, because I see here is an empowering leader that wants me to be successful. And in that sense, I catch it. As I grow as a leader, I also want to see the next generation being more successful than me. And I think that goes on and on, generational after generations.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing a real life examples for that. Okay, and now the next question is for the Reverend Vijayesh and Dr. Bambang, especially on this issue of families. This one is from the Zoom chat. Leadership in churches most of the time is a reflection of leadership in the family. Intergenerational leadership becomes a hard thing to do because that is not the normal way we lead families. How can we influence families to be more intergenerational as well? Dr. Bambang, want to start?
Yeah, I think I've seen it is not based on a very academic studies, but I have observed where family giving responsibility, especially family in those who are doing homeschooling. Normally, the older children will mature faster because they share responsibility taking care of the younger one. Where things are discussed together around dining table, where people can share and not afraid of being judged as a mistake, where family is not a circle of trust. So the children will grow as what Pastor Garrett said, insecure leader. When you don't have a love in the family, unconditional love in the family, respect in the family, then you groom a unsecure leader in the future. So you can destroy actually church leaders many years before they become church leaders at home. But you can also bless the world and the leaders through the way you manage the relationship at home. Sharing responsibility, giving delegate authority, discuss about decision together. I think love and respect very important even from the womb, I think. Leadership from the womb.
Okay, so it can be as simple as having dining together, having a dinner together can be also one of the suggested example by Dr. Bambang. How about Reverend Vijayesh? Any point for this question?
I will completely echo with Dr. Bambang over there. You see, leadership begins in the family. That's where it all begins. And two key words would be affirmation and encouragement. We need to affirm our children, affirm them for the gifts and the talents that they have, and we need to encourage them. That encouragement can only come when you spend time with them. The curse of the modern family is that you don't get to spend enough time with your children, especially for those who are living in the cities. So time out with the children, affirming them, encouraging them, and like before, allowing them to make mistakes, and not coming down very heavy on them when they make mistakes, because it is expected. When you make mistakes, they will learn. And attitude that we just heard from Garrett, I want you to be more successful than I am. One of my mentors is a man by the name of Pierre, and he is very fond of mountain climbing. So mountain climbing and hiking. And every year he would take his family to climb the mountains in Switzerland, in the Alps. That's where he lives. And he was sharing with me one day, he says, one of the happiest moments in my life was when my son raced past ahead of me and reached the summit much before than I did. He says, that was one of the proudest moments of my life. And I think that demonstrates intergenerational leadership. You affirm them, you train them, and then you revel in their success.
Thank you for the examples. Mountain climbing examples can be very easy to remember. Yes, okay, maybe now it's a question more for Ms. Yamini and Pastor Garrett, but Dr. Bambang and Reverend Vijayesh also can add on. The question is this. I think just now Pastor Garrett also mentioned mistakes about this matter. Mistakes are part of learning. Yes, agree. But this is not easy to apply when we have insecure senior leaders in their positions. So what can we do as a younger leaders if we have our senior leaders are insecure? What should we do? Get rid of them? Or what is your suggestion if your senior leaders are insecure?
Okay, I can try first, and I think that's a great question, and I think one thing is that, like what we say, generations is not replacement but reinforcement. And I think that as a younger generation, it's not just the responsibility of the older generation to make us successful, but it's also for us to assure them that we are not replacing them, but we are reinforcing them. And how are we able to support them and help them? And they begin to realize that as we grow, as we become better leaders, that we can support them better. And as a church or an organization, we get better as well. So I think we as the younger generation also has a responsibility to play a part in assuring our pastors and leaders. And I believe that God has placed us all in our place for a specific reason and purpose. It's not by accident. So wherever we are placed in, God has a purpose and a role for us, and we need to be led by the Holy Spirit and begin to be a great support to our leaders.
Thank you. So rather than being a threat, we should also affirm our senior leaders as well. What do you think, Ms. Yamini?
I'll speak from my personal, my personal view is this. I always think of King David. When God appointed him, he was very young. But the road to leadership was tough. It was not easy at all. And no matter how Saul treated him, his response was always commitment and loyalty towards Saul. And there were times that King David erred, and there were times that King Saul erred. But I also like the specific passage when, in fact, somebody didn't really kill Saul, but they came and they falsely said that they did. And they thought that King David would reward him. In fact, he reprimanded him. So I don't think we should let people define how we respond. And that could be people around us, and that could be leaders as well, because ultimately we trust in God. And I think our values need to show that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the biblical example of David and Saul are actually very spot on. Actually, David continue supporting Saul regardless. Okay, we only have 4 minutes left, so that's why this is the last question for all of you. The question is this: in current post-truth era, erosion of trust is prevalent. It's everywhere. This erosion of trust also happening between generations. So can you share or give some practical advice how the church could reverse this phenomenon, this trend? Rather than the erosion of trust, how can we build trust between generations? Practically, a practical advice, I think, should be the Gen Z asking these questions. Give me practical advice, what to do. Okay, anyone want to start?
Can I go first?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
Yeah, so I believe, like I shared during my sharing as well, the valuing of the relationship is the key. We must all, we must realize that all the efforts that are being made is to enrich the relationship and ultimately contribute to the whole. That's point number one. Point number two is communication. How do you overcome the trust deficit? You will only overcome the trust deficit if you communicate. See, it's a choice. When I trust somebody, I'm choosing to trust that person, but it is also a response of that person coming across as trustworthy. The person will come across as trustworthy during communication and during my relationship with him. And my choosing to trust that person would come out of my resolve to strengthen the relationship no matter what. This, I believe, is key.
Oh, sorry, I think we may lose you, Reverend Vijayesh. But anyway, I think it's what his point is too, is communications and relationships. They are the two key important things to build trust. Okay, how about anyone else? Next.
Yeah, I can share a little. And
Yep.
I think that trust works both ways. And I think in our church, the leaders really trust young people. One thing that our pastors do is that they really trust young people. The Bible says that where the oxen are, the trough is clean, but with great increase comes with the strength of an ox. So the young people are like oxes, and they will make a mess, they will spoil things. But that's where, as leaders, we need to still trust and entrust them with things. So for example, we have 13-year-old, 14-year-old sound people, and we train them and we entrust them with $200,000, $300,000 worth of sound equipment, and when they feel it and they feel that they are trusted, they will rise to the occasion. And well, sometimes they make mistakes. You have to set aside a budget for spoiled equipment. and so when the young people feel like, hey, I'm believed in, I'm trusted, then they will learn to also trust the leaders, that their leaders actually have a heart for me. Yeah, so I think trust works both ways.
So do you think trust is given or earned?
I think for young people, you need to give them trust. Yeah, because one thing that our pastors always teach us that is that we encourage the young people. It's not about endorsement, but it's about encouragement. So it's not like only when you do well, then I clap for you, then I trust you. No, it's even before that we believe in you.
Thank you. Dr. Bambang?
Okay.
Yeah.
Two things. One, I would like to just go back a little bit to the earlier question about if your leader is not secure. Just want to give a little bit of tips. There is a competency or skills called leading up. So it's not just leading down, you can lead up. Leading up is not about position, but about influence. And I think, again, agree with Reverend Vijayesh, relationship is the context. Whatever you do without relationship, people will suspect what is your motives. But relationship will secure your contribution. If you say to your boss that I'm here for your success, and showing that in life, that's make a good platform. Now, on trust, I think oftentimes we are not a good steward of trust. God trusts us in spite of. So our failure, how many times we failed, how many times we betray him, and yet he trusts us. Oftentimes people make mistake and fail us, we don't trust them anymore. So we are not a good steward of trust. Now, many people give testimony in the church because, believing in the great God. Well, it's not surprise. God is the creator. Believe in God is not surprise. It's normal. If you don't believe in God, that's strange. But for God to believe in you, to trust you, that's a miracle. And we don't forward this to other peoples. We think we are the only one that worth to be trusted, not other people. So I think the problem with us, with me, with other people as well, is a stewardship of trust. Now with trust, we have, whether you trust people on their character or their competence or their commitment. But I agree, we need to begin to give first and then forgive. Okay, instead of give and demand, but give and forgive. And that's how trust works.
Thank you. So we build trust as the way God trust us as well. So last but not least, Ms. Yamini, what is your take on this?
I mean, agree with everybody what they said in the panel, but maybe also something different is even as we work in organizations and churches, whether we should also focus on setting up systems and processes, that bring about a particular change. And often we sometimes don't focus on those. And if we can build proper systems and processes that gives that kind of confidence for the younger generation as well. Even if this particular person would, sometimes fail me, maybe this process would work, this system would work, or something like that. But of course, in terms of relationships and all of that is extremely important. But maybe if we also have that additional factor very strongly in place, that would also help to build trust and build bridges.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah. Building the system as to also to support to the building trust in the organizations. That's one good point. Okay, the time is up. Thank you very much, Dr. Bambang, Reverend Vijayesh, Miss Yamini, and Pastor Garrett. Can we give them a round of applause? I think virtually, you know how to do it in the Zoom. Give an applause, give a thumbs up, give a love. Thank you very much for their insight input. So I'll pass back the time to Ms. Priska.